Hello and welcome to another edition of VU Sports Wire, the season finale of VTV's official sports program. Cutler Klein, Simon Gibbs, Ryan Sheehy here in studio. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Fantastic finale show for you today. We're going to give out some end-of-season awards at the end of the show here. Your Coach of the Year, your Player of the Year, and your Moment of the Year in Commodore sports. I know baseball season and other sports hasn't ended yet, but we got to give out some end-of-semester awards here. But first, we're going to delve into the latest and greatest issues in Commodore sports. Namely, let's talk Kumar Rocker again for Vanderbilt Baseball. Had a stellar outing for the first time as a Saturday starter.
SEC Freshman of the Week as well.
SEC Freshman of the Week. He was a Saturday starter against Arkansas this weekend, pitched an absolute gem. I mean, the numbers are insane. His best outing of his collegiate career so far and away. And that comes off of a very, very tough outing the weekend before against Georgia. So, given his inconsistencies, I got to ask, do you believe in Kumar Rocker as a guy that is a stable force in this rotation? I mean, do you think Saturday is the right spot for him in the end?
You know, I think this comes down to confidence. As a freshman, it's hard to have confidence. He came into the season a little nervous. He wasn't sure what to expect, and the pressure would get to him. I think Coach Corbin moving him into that Saturday role can almost seem like a confidence boost because, you know, it's not the ultimate game of the series, you know, showing off in a 1-1 tie against one of the best teams in the country. It really comes down to being in a spot where there's less pressure on a Saturday where win or lose on Friday, Saturday's game is not the, you know, have all be all. It's really Sunday's game that brings the most pressure. So I think you move him to Saturday and it's an interesting proposition. It remains to be seen whether I believe in that being, you know, the consistent version of Kumar Rocker that we're going to see, you know, 7 innings, fanning 7 batters. We haven't seen that all season. So I want him to go out and prove it once more so I know that he is that player that is confident enough to be doing, you know, that at least every once in a while or otherwise be relatively consistent on the mound. But right now I think it's better for him to be in that Saturday role because it takes a lot of pressure off a freshman's shoulders.
Absolutely. I mean, you take the pressure off of the freshmen, and I think that's what really opens them up and kind of gets their legs under them, as we might say. But if we're going to talk about whether we believe in Kumar Rocker or not, I think there's 2 types of belief. There's, do you believe that he could step in and he's going to be the game changer that for us right now? Or do you think that the Commodores baseball team has possibly a future star in its hands? I think the answer to the latter is yes, absolutely. He's got the fundamentals to blow away the rest of the competition. Obviously, we talk about the fastball. He's slowly getting his legs under him now. And in the future, I think he's going to be great. You talked, though, about, you know, this is a one-off, I mean, not necessarily that this is a one-off, but this is the first time we've really seen this. We haven't seen the consistency of, you know, this quality of pitching all season. So I can't say I fully believe that he's, like, one of our top pitchers yet. But that being said, I think he could probably prove me wrong, in a sense, pretty soon here if he gets back out there next Saturday as well, and continues to improve on his game and shows more consistency in being a top ace that he could be.
Yeah, you look at the numbers in this start. 7 innings pitched, 4 hits, no earned runs, no walks, 7 strikeouts. And he did it on I believe 84 pitches, which is crazy. It's ridiculous that he's able to have such a phenomenal outing, and that's good for any pitcher. I think the other concern that you have with this is that, yeah, Rocker stepped up, but then on Sunday you move Patrick Raby, who has been pretty much Mr. Consistent all season long, puts up a dud in the potential sweep game, and now obviously Vanderbilt had a golden chance to win it anyways and didn't, but he still didn't pitch great.
But, you know, you can't really discredit him for that. Everyone's going to go out there and have, you know, one bad start every once in a while. Once he has 2, then we worry and we start to think that no one is confident enough to pitch on Sundays. But right now, I think that was just, you know, one of those off days for him. And Rocker, you know, could have really shown his real stripes with a little less pressure.
Yeah, well, I think going forward, there's an interesting question because obviously, if you win Game 1, there's not a lot of pressure on Saturday. But if you lose Game 1, all of the pressure is on Saturday because that's how you salvage the series. So, and in baseball, you obviously, starters have to plan ahead. You have to be able to plan to have these starters available in this game. You have to go into it saying who you're going to start more or less because of just the mental preparation and the physical preparation it takes from these starting pitchers. However, Is there a thing where, based on your game 1 result, then you decide whether or not you're going to go with Raby or Rocker in game 2?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I would like to see Vanderbilt get into some crunch time situations on a day where Rocker isn't pitching. Maybe a midweek game where, it's not the most heralded opponent and Rocker isn't going to pitch again till the weekend. I'd want to see him go in and try and close a 3-2 game. Put him in a really high-pressure scenario, see how he handles it. If he handles it poorly, then I think it becomes abundantly clear that it is this, pressure situation. I also just am a little bit biased because I do think having that large of a frame and throwing it that fast makes you an excellent closer.
Yeah.
But I want to see Rocker, in some different roles on this team because I'm really not sure if it's plausible to be switching the rotation based on what happens on day 1. Although it would be a Coach Corbin move because I didn't expect Rocker to be starting as early as he did this season. So I wouldn't discount that.
I'm going to agree that switching the rotation around depending on whether you win game 1 or not is not really a plausible thing. You can't really go into it and always have players on the fence about who's going to be on the mound come tomorrow. But maybe it's a bit of a gamble. I think that setting the lineup and putting Rocker on day 2, regardless of whether you win game 1 or not, really puts him in the moment and gives him a chance to either shine or definitively tell Corbin and the rest of the staff that he's not ready for quite the big moments yet, and maybe put him in more of the midweek games, like you were saying, or have him, act as a closer in certain scenarios. I don't think that's a bad idea. I know he's used to being a starting ace, but if his utility is elsewhere for now, then that's where it is. But maybe it's just the hard line in me, but I think that setting the rotation and then just seeing how these boys play in their roles is really going to tell you the most that you can get about what they're made of, whether they're able to play, and ultimately tell you what you have in your pitching core.
Yeah, and you look at this team as a whole, and when Rocker struggles or when Raby struggles, you wonder, Mason Hickman's pitching really well in the midweeks. Why don't you move him to a weekend role? Well, the biggest issue that Vanderbilt had last season was dropping midweek games that they should not have dropped.
Yeah.
This year they've won 8 in a row, and they have been proficient at making sure they don't drop too many of those, and that's mostly because Mason Hickman has been such a gem on the mound there. So I think Corbin's strategy is basically send Mason Hickman out for those games, almost, I'm not saying guarantee a win for that one, but give yourself the best chance to win that one, and then stick with Rocker on the weekends because, like you said, Simon, he's just too big and throws too hard to not have him in there in that weekend rotation.
I don't know if you want to go with your go-to guy in a midweek game. You should have the confidence as a top.
He might not be a go-to guy, though, but he might just be able to dominate
Who?
these games.
Rocker?
No, Hickman. Hickman
Right,
might not
okay.
be necessarily
Okay,
a go-to
that's
guy.
fair.
You put him on the weekend, he might not be the same.
That's fair.
Have the same level of domination as a more inferior midweek opponent.
I just think that of course, last year's performance in the midweek games really set this precedent. I think it's a little concerning that a top 10 team in the nation is not a for sure thing against these Austin Peay's and Middle Tennessee's, every midweek. So that's a little concerning to me. But I think a few of these big time SEC wins moving forward can really elevate this team. And I'd be curious to see what you two think, this team's ceiling is.
Ceiling. It's funny you say that. I was just thinking the other day about the piece that the Hustler put out a couple months ago about the ceiling and the floor for the Vanderbilt baseball team. And I wrote in my ceiling piece, I had them at I think the max record I had them at was about 50-6. I've gone past that, obviously, and that's why it's a max. But if this team actually plays up to their potential, it's quite literally probably the best baseball team in the country.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone doubts that.
Right.
The question is, can they continue to put out the way they have been? And I think actually this year is a vast improvement over last year when, as you mentioned, they were dropping midweek games and it was uncharacteristic and they were losing series. And I think you see a change to this year in that, one, they're picking up the midweek games. Two, I think they've only dropped 2 series so far.
Right.
And 3, as I'll talk a little bit about later, I should say. They got over a bit of a hump when it comes to certain rivals from Gainesville. But in general, this is a team that if they put it all together at the right time, and that's what the College World Series is all about, there's absolutely nothing stopping them from winning the title.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think national title is on the table. National seed is very much on the table going into the NCAA tournament. They need to do two things down the stretch in order to make sure that happens. One, keep winning your midweeks, and two, win an SEC series on the road. They haven't been able to do that really. They need to start doing that pretty soon because they've had a couple of really tough series on the road so far. They need to actually do that against what are going to be inferior SEC opponents going forward because their toughest part of their schedule is behind them. So with that, that'll wrap up our quick discussion of baseball. Moving on now to the Vanderbilt basketball realm. Jerry Stackhouse,
This is an exciting
the
one.
head coach of Vanderbilt men's basketball, and reportedly already bringing in his first assistant coach to the men's basketball program, David Grace, an assistant coach coming out of Cal, most recently before that with UCLA, most notably there, the guy who brought in Lonzo Ball, the current Los Angeles Laker, to UCLA, bringing Ball family to UCLA at that point. I don't know if UCLA is thanking them or cursing him for bringing the Ball family into UCLA at this point, bringing them into that ranks. But you know, David Grace seems like a great hire. He's been tabbed as one of the best recruiters in the country, at least on the West Coast, in terms of his prowess. So, is this the right move for Stackhouse, bringing in a guy like this?
Color, I think it was a home run hire. I'll be honest with you though, 24 hours ago right now, I saw that someone had liked one of our tweets that was clearly from you. That was a screenshot of this random guy's Twitter bio that said he was the Vanderbilt men's associate coach. And I was like, Cutler, I have no idea who this guy is. Neither do you, and we shouldn't be talking about it. I Googled him, and I was blown away by how much he's done in such a little time period, and he's gone relatively unrecognized.
Yeah.
As Ryan mentioned me prior to the show, 20 years was it at the Air Force?
Yep.
And
not at Air Force Academy, in the
Yes,
Air Force.
yes,
He
that's
was
what I
a
meant.
fighter
No,
pilot.
no.
He was a pilot
Yes.
in the Air Force.
And once he moved to the college coaching realm in 2006 at San Francisco State, he had a number of different assistant coaching jobs before landing at UCLA and most recently Cal Berkeley. And what I find to be so impressive about him is not only the ability to recruit, but the pipeline he has out west that he could bring here. And so the ability to recruit, what speaks to that is in 2016, ESPN polled almost 60 of the top head coaches in Division I and asked them who they think the best recruiters in the country are. And he made the list at number 7 in the country in recruiting, and that was good for number 1 on the West Coast back when the Pac-12 wasn't necessarily as bad as it is now, maybe. Yeah. But that says a lot about what he could recruit. And when he moves back to the Southeast, he comes to Nashville, where Jerry Stackhouse, obviously a big name, doesn't have the collegiate experience, but has a little bit of a pipeline in Stackhouse Elite in Atlanta, where he could help recruit some of the Southeastern guys. We now have a coach with direct connections, as he was a former coach of the Compton Magic, who is one of the greatest AAU teams in the country right now and is a growing program. And he even went on to co-found the Arizona Magic, an affiliate of the Compton Magic. And when you have an AAU pipeline feeding from the west to the southeast, and you have another pipeline in the southeast, that's a dangerous combination. And another thing that Betsy mentioned on our radio show before is Vanderbilt has never really branched out into the West Coast. Mm-hmm. So who knows what the ceiling is? I mean, if you could snag 1 or 2 5-stars from the west and snag 1 or 2 from the southeast, I mean, that's a crazy possibility.
Absolutely. And I feel a little bit jealous right now. You took a lot of my talking points here.
Oops.
But I'll try and really stick in 2 things here of the dichotomy I think he brings. One is, obviously, you mentioned all the recruiting stuff.
Yeah.
This is absolute score for Jerry Stackhouse in terms of the talent he's going to be able to bring into the program, which is something that I think we were all very apprehensive of when Bryce Drew left, given his recruiting prowess and the concern that he was going to be losing recruits and we weren't going to be able to bring in the same level of talent that he'd been bringing in. So I think that settles the nerves a little bit on that account. On the other front, Stackhouse gets a guy in Grace who has experience dealing with these young players at a fundamental level, and additionally, you mentioned the Air Force experience. He's not going to be pushed over by them.
Yep.
This is a guy who is going to bring a disciplined side to this team that I think really will keep them in the strategies of the game and will help them gain the confidence that it takes, that we saw them lacking at times this year, late in games. And we saw them start to make mistakes, get out of formation. They weren't running plays quite the way we thought they looked like they might be. But I think Grace in general just fits the best of both worlds, I should say. and he's going to be a great hire on the court and off the court in bringing new kids to the program.
You mentioned the discipline side of it. I think that's incredibly important. As an Air Force veteran, obviously he's used to that level of discipline, and he's brought that style to his coaching. And I think, like you said, last year this team was incredibly undisciplined in big situations. We could talk about a lot of times down the stretch when Vanderbilt just couldn't finish games, and that led to their 0-19 SEC record. I think that he'll bring that aspect of it as well. But now that you have one assistant coach, you can have two more, and Stackhouse is going to need two more assistant coaches on his staff to round it out, to have the complete package. And now you have an excellent recruiter, the kind of college basketball recruiting expert that people said he needed to bring in on his staff in order to succeed, and he's now got him. What are you kind of looking at for the other assistant coaches? Do you try and bring in another big-name NBA friend, maybe one Rasheed Wallace in some way?
Don't get me excited.
It's highly speculative, but I'm saying, is that the angle you go? Do you bring in another kind of former pro big name? Do you continue to find these recruiting experts, tap in and get more pipelines? And obviously, you have two more to work with, so you can do both. Well, kind of what's the priority there?
For me, at this point, because I think the focus should not be on recruiting. People said that Stackhouse wouldn't be able to recruit due to a lack of collegiate experience. I think if you take Grace out of the equation, Stackhouse is still going to be just fine recruiting. I mean, he's a former first-round draft pick. This guy is not to be, taken lightly. He was in the NBA for well over 10 years, made multiple All-Star games. He's going to be able to recruit. And as we saw, Cutler and I, having gone to lunch with him and Betsy a couple days ago, he's a personable guy, too.
Yeah,
it's not like he's going to have any trouble winning over the players.
No.
I do think, though, that this should be maybe focused on someone who has a long history of coaching experience, who can, maybe help draw up plays, because I don't doubt that Stackhouse and Grace are both very talented coaches. Stackhouse obviously has been an NBA assistant coach for a handful of years now, head coach in the G League, and then when it comes to Grace, he's been assistant coaching since 2006. I want like a seasoned vet in our last guy, a really old, wise basketball knowledge, someone who could really gain a different crowd almost, so to speak, of Vanderbilt fans, and you know how much these fans love tradition. I think it would be nice to have an old style coach.
So basically a Lou Holtz of basketball in some way, if that person exists?
Yeah.
He's after the basketball Yoda.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of different routes you can go with this. I think especially the recruiting prowess that Grace brings offers a lot of flexibility to what you get to do with your other two assistant coaches now. Because Stackhouse I don't think he's necessarily lacking for coaching. I'm certainly not going to say that after he led Toronto to the G League title and he went to Memphis and was an assistant coach there. He's got the props, he's got the experience. I think now it's kind of up to him, and he has to internally assess with his team what he thinks he needs. That veteran voice, that could be a huge boost to them. Again, while I think Grace will absolutely, as I mentioned with the whole Air Force thing, I think he'll absolutely bring a discipline to the team and really guide those young players in the right direction. I think there's also a level of respect that those players will draw from someone who's been around kids like them or been in the system, whether that's the NCAA or the NBA or the G League or wherever, for a long amount of time. And I think that's really going to benefit the level of respect that they have for the coaching staff and how much they buy into the system. Because I think that's what you really didn't see towards the end of the Bryce Drew era. Was it didn't look like the players were really buying into the system. It didn't look like they were trying to play. They weren't playing defense quite as efficiently as we were hoping. The plays didn't seem to be adding up. The free throws late in games, it didn't seem like anyone was really making improvement. I think if you bring in a coach who's a bit older and has been around this track a couple times, you start to gain that insight. And I mean, furthermore, I'm just going to say, it's not a bad thing to bring in another assistant coach with a lot of recruiting prowess. Nobody's going to complain about that either.
Bring in another former NBA player.
Exactly. No, I think that's why I think you absolutely have a lot of flexibility here.
Yeah.
Although I'd say, of those three kind of fit roles, the one that does seem to be lacking is a seasoned 20-plus year basketball vet.
Yeah. One thing that I left off, and I guess this goes along with the veteran candidate. There's one thing that these two coaches, as great as they are, do not have, at least to my knowledge, and that is experience coaching in the tournament. I would like to see them bring in someone who, even if it was as a low-level coach, had some experience in some capacity, at least the round of 64 in the tournament.
Well, Grace made it with UCLA with that Lonzo Ball team. They made it
that
pretty
was,
far.
Right. You're right.
They did make it that, but obviously they didn't do, for all the talent. But there is certainly some validity to your point, because for all that talent that the team had, they didn't exactly go they didn't go as far as they probably would have wanted to. They ran into a pretty good Kentucky team.
Well, yeah, I think that was.
It was in the regionals. It was in the
It was that was the year that I believe, was it UNC won that year?
Yeah, it was. They obviously made it far, but that team had national title ambitions, so they didn't quite get there. So there is still a shred of validity to your point, for sure.
They also had like another coach, so to speak, on the sidelines in one of the Ball family.
And Mr. Ball there, and of course LaMelo, not going to UCLA at this rate. So the Ball family, what a family they are. With that, we'll move on to our end of season awards. We're wrapping up the spring semester here at Vanderbilt, and we have to give out a few end of year awards. We're going to start with Coach of the Year, and I'll start with my pick for Vanderbilt Coach of the Year. There's a lot of good candidates, but I have to go with Darren Ambrose, head coach of the Vanderbilt soccer program. And he's been building up for a long time with this program, and he has a lot of experience, and he brought the team to new heights this year. Last year, he brought them to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a while. This year, he brings them to the second round of the NCAA tournament again, winning an SEC regular season title, and brought the team to national recognition, got them ranked, has brought in a couple of excellent recruiting classes in the last couple of years, and he's kind of revitalized this program. He essentially kind of did for Vanderbilt soccer what Tim Corbin did for Vanderbilt baseball a couple of decades ago, and I think that type of prowess and the way he's taken this program from a kind of darling program to now a force on the national stage that's really going to do a lot of damage in the SEC next year, in my opinion.
I think Cutler makes a fair point. I think Darren Ambrose has done wonders for this program, but I'm going to point out Derek Mason as my candidate for Coach of the Year. Derek Mason has done a terrific job in his 5 years here. He made his second bowl game this year. That can't be overlooked. One thing I will say about the team play this year is that a few weeks into the season, there were serious conversations, and we were debating on this show as to whether or not we should fire Derek Mason. To go from that point to completely turn the season around and reset the tone in the middle of the season is so impressive to me, especially in football, where that might be the hardest sport to turn things around because you only play so many games. But I think the team itself and its performance speaks wonders. But above all, with the loss of Turner Cockrell, we know how huge Derek Mason was in that. He was always there for his team. And people say that, there's a such thing as a player's coach. I don't think I had ever met one until I really saw what he was about. And I think Derek Mason has absolutely won over the players' hearts.
All right. Not to say that tenure and longevity have any place in a Coach of the Year award. But Tim Corbin is still around and doing just as well as he's always done. He's my Coach of the Year. I'm not sure how far back you want to extend the achievements for this Coach of the Year since we're about 2 months away from the end of his season. But leading in from last year after probably one of the greatest College World Series Super Regionals of all time, he takes in the number one draft class, or not the number one draft class, number one recruiting class in the country, and has absolutely turned this team around from the relatively low achievement that it had last year. I mean, if we look back to this point last year, everyone's disappointed in where Commodores baseball was going. They were dropping the midweek games, and they wound up not even as a one seed come CWS time. Now, you look at them, they're 6th in the nation, have won multiple series, including a sweep of the Gators, and they're absolutely trucking. And there's nothing to be said about that other than Tim Corbin has managed this team and all the talent and all of everything that comes with that talent, we can leave it at that, he's been incredible.
Yeah, he definitely has. Moving on now, we're going to look at the player of the year, and there's a whole lot of players in this category that are deserving of the honor. And one of the players I'm going to do. Well, actually, before we move on to this one, I want to give a quick kind of honorable mention. Coach of the Year, Beth Hewitt, Vanderbilt lacrosse, turning that program around this year. I think she's done a remarkable job. They moved conferences. dealing with that change, dealing with, or turning over a culture in her first year after being promoted from an assistant coach. She did excellent work. But now moving on to Player of the Year, my pick for Player of the Year, J.J. Bleday. He's going to be a lottery MLB draft pick this year, and he has been absolutely crushing baseballs. When he steps up to the plate, you kind of assume he's going to hit a home run or he's going to hit that ball really, really, really far. And he's just hitting at a clip unprecedented for a player in the SEC. And he's leading the SEC in homers. He's got 16 right now. He is just firing on all cylinders. And you look at his defensive acumen, and it's pretty similar. He's gunned down a couple of players from the outfield this year trying to take an extra base. And I think overall he's just got so much skill and so much talent, and he's kind of the core of an incredibly deep and incredibly talented Commodore baseball lineup.
Yeah. I was stuck between two candidates for this award, and both being freshmen, I will quickly make note of Aaron Nesmith as my freshman of the year. No one entered the season thinking that Garland would be a 10-game wonder and Simi Shatu would be, in my eyes, a little bit of a disappointment, to say the least. And I think that Aaron Nesmith not only outshined expectations and played unbelievably well for the most part this season, it was the way that in the fourth quarter when we're down by 30, he's throwing his body around like a rag doll for every loose ball. Mm-hmm. That sort of dedication you can't teach, and I applaud him for his efforts this year. Looking forward to see him next year. But my Player of the Year has to go to Haley Hopkins. I see no better candidate than the one person, the freshman, albeit after returning from a staph infection, the redshirt freshman, I should say. She led the team to a number of accolades, and if you'll excuse me, I can't really be subtle. I'm just going to read this list off my computer because it's too long. But she was 2018 SEC Freshman of the Year, 2018 All-America Third Team, 2018 SEC First Team, 2018 SEC Freshman Team, 2018 All-Southeast Region First Team, 2018 Top Drawer Freshman First Team, 2018 SEC Freshman of the Week twice, 2018 SEC Offensive Player of the Week, ranked second in Commodore history in goals with 14, second in points with 35, led the team in goals this season, points this season, game-winning goals this season, and tied for the lead in assists this season. And lastly, of course, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, after the season had ended, she actually was named to the U23 USA Women's National Team for a game. That's insane. That's a lot in 1 year, let alone your first year. So I applaud her, and I'm excited to see how she could lead the team to more success next year with more experience under her belt.
All right. Now, there was a lot of other candidates. Perhaps, Bleday was mentioned as one who's probably going to wind up in the pros next year. Hopkins had an extraordinary freshman year. But in terms of a player that completely changed the culture around their team this year, I think there's no better candidate than Keyshawn Vaughn of the football team.
Yeah.
He came in, and we were talking about him in the preseason as maybe a back that we'd been waiting for him since his red shirt last year. He's a local kid. There was a bit of hype around him, and he came in, and when he touched the ball, he absolutely exploded. Yeah. I mean, this guy, he's got the speed, the quickness, the agility, and especially we saw this, he absolutely took over. Now, granted, they didn't win, but he absolutely took over in the bowl game against Baylor. Third play of the game, 75, 73, something like that yards. He was a force to be reckoned with. And in addition, despite having some hype around him for a possible draft pick to the NFL, he'll be coming back next year leading this offense on the ground and in some ways through the air. There's so much talent with this young lad, and he's just got a bright future ahead of him.
I agree.
Yes, he absolutely does.
As we transition onto the moment of the year, I would say that if we had won that football game, it would have been any of his rushes.
Any of those runs.
It was like baffling to me just how every time he touched the ball, he just like teleported past the defense, and before you know it was in open field. It was wild.
The last one that didn't go for a touchdown, that went down the sideline.
Oh, that would have been number 3. That would have been number 3.
Yeah, it went to the 1 yard line, and they eventually punched it in. But it was just it was otherworldly.
Marshawn Lynch.
It was Marshawn Lynch-esque. And to watch it in person was just it was a performance for the ages, and that was incredible. Looking forward to seeing what he does next year with the 2019 Commodores. And lastly, our moment of the year. And for moment of the year, I have to go back to football here, and I got to talk about the win over Ole Miss in overtime to set up going to a bowl game with a win over Tennessee the next week, because that win, people talk about beating Tennessee for the third year in a row. That was a great win. It was a dominant performance. But you have to look back to the weekend before in that win over Ole Miss that really set that up in the first place, because they could have very easily lost that game. It took into overtime. They scored. Kalijah Lipscomb had a dominant performance despite getting the unsportsmanlike penalty for throwing the ball in the air. He had a strong performance. But then it was the defensive effort in that overtime, a controversial call in the end zone on replay review overturning an Ole Miss touchdown, then coming back there on fourth down. Jawan Williams, who I think is going to be a top 3-round pick in next week's NFL draft, coming in, making a key pass breakup. That game just showed a lot of heart, showed a lot of resiliency from this team. And the week after putting up a dud against Mizzou, coming back into that game and just finding a way to win, showed that this team had something special, showed that this team could win, and it set them up well for a win over Tennessee the next week and to eventually get to the Texas Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Although my moment of the year is actually off the field, and it's not going to be a game. It's going to be the hiring of our new athletic director, Malcolm Turner, who I can easily see turning around each and every athletics program in the next 30 years, for all we know how long he could be here. But the way, our storied former athletic director, David Williams, had retired, and Malcolm Turner was eventually named to fill that void. And then shortly thereafter, David Williams tragically passed away. There is just an unbelievable amount of pressure, and there's such big shoes to fill. But he stepped in with poise and with confidence. And despite having no collegiate experience, which everyone that is hating on Jerry Stackhouse should be looking at the fact that our great athletic director had none prior to this gig either, it's been extremely impressive. And I think the way he also, being his first decision on the job, made one of the toughest decisions he could have made, which is to hire a coach, to fire a coach, just months after he was hired. That takes a lot of guts. And then to go out and replace him with someone like Jerry Stackhouse, it just goes to show you what his G League connections can get him. And I truly think that there will be a day when the three of us return here as alumni and we get to see our teams play at a much higher level because of the impact that our new athletic director, Malcolm Turner, will have on these programs.
Yeah. I'm going to shoot a quick honorable mention for my moment of the year to the bowl game against Baylor, which, albeit when we lost, the national media attention that drew, even for a brief time, was absolutely huge. That the score of the game, they just ran up on offense. There was so many highlights to watch. It was flooding SportsCenter the next day, especially coming off of, I think it was
the Cheez-It Bowl.
The Cheez-It Bowl.
I was about to say
it was the Cheez-It Bowl.
That was the two most conflicting games I've ever seen in my life.
The utter contrast of those two just made it all the more, attention-wise, that just drove Vandy into the spotlight for a brief time. So quick shout out to that. But my moment of the year is the
Cheez-It Bowl.
The Vanderbilt Commodores' 3-game sweep over the Florida Gators in baseball last month. This is a huge stepping stone for this Commodores baseball team. They had trouble with Florida for years, being eliminated by them in the College World Series all those years ago. They hadn't won a series against them, I believe it was about 5 or 6 years. They hadn't even won a game last year. And then to come home, play this team, who Tim Corbin is friends with the manager, by the way. There's a bit of a friendly rivalry there, so this was just as equally important for Tim as for anyone else. And it wasn't just that they won all 3 games, it was the way they did it. They absolutely mopped the floor with the Gators. That was huge for this team, and I think that's going to help propel them forward into a possible run at the college title this year.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Well, that does it for our end of season awards. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. All right.
Our two best seniors.
Yes.
Who are doing their last episode with us. How did we forget that award?
Yeah, no.
2 greatest seniors, to Cutler and Ryan back here, who's been doing the work every week. Appreciate everything you two have done, and looking forward to see what you guys do in the future.
Yeah, thank you guys for everything. I wanted to give a shout out to some people who are not here right now. Max Schneider, who is abroad, who's been hosting this show with me for the last 2 years. Drew Sundaram, who has been away for a little while as well. Those two will be back next year. You'll see them on this program. These two, I hope, will be back next year. And a quick shout out to 2 of my favorite alums, Amanda Marcutulio and Ben Weinrib, who got me onto this program and started me out here. And lastly, thank you to Ryan Suter, our director extraordinaire, who makes us look great every single week and puts this show together. This show would not be possible without him. He's graduating as well. Y'all, there are gonna have to be a lot of big shoes to fill with Ryan over there in the director's booth. So thank you so much to everyone who has ever watched this show over the last 4 years. For Ryan Sheehy, Simon Gibbs, I'm Cutler Klein. So long, and they'll see you next time.